Hey, Slosh, I do buckaroos. How the heck are you? Waited about an hour. I want to do one more happy hour video, and I'll take a little bit of a break. But I did two gin earlier. I wanted to do two whiskey with you. So here's what I'm starting with. I used the last of my, I had about 2.5 ounces left of my Tiakida Hinterland bourbon whiskey finished in maple syrup barrels. It's at 92 proof. So I did a version of a maple old fashioned, I guess, or a maple Manhattan, depending on how you want to spin it. But I'm serving it straight up. I'm not using any ice in the glass. I have it very well chilled, but I'm just not a fan of the big ice, which is why um, if you don't see an ice cube, you tend to think more Manhattan than old fashioned. But nevertheless, the ingredients are the same regardless. It's 2.5 ounces of the whiskey, a half ounce of this particular product, a bourbon barrel aged maple syrup that I picked up in Ohio when we were on vacation last year, and then black walnut bitters and a cinnamon stick garnish. Why? Why not? I could think of another garnish that made more sense, which is why I use a cinnamon stick. But hell, use whatever you want. It really makes me no never mind. It always makes me wonder. Oh gosh, that's delicious. It always makes me wonder when other folks want to criticize somebody else's cocktail. Well, I would do this or that, or I would add this or that. Okay, you add this. You're not drinking this one. This one is just how I want it. Or when you do, I post a lot of food pictures and stuff as well. So folks say, well, yeah, but I don't like it like that. Well, you're not eating it. I guess the negativity never really makes sense to me. So, anyways, Sláinte. So I'm not using a simple. I'm not using a sugar cube. The only sweetness in this particular drink is the maple syrup, but it is rather sweet, so it doesn't need anything else. Using my Tiakida glass. Let me show you that. This is very nice. That Hinterland is very nice. I thought about doing something different with it, but I didn't. I've got another product I'll talk about later, but I do have the Hinterland bourbon cream. I may do a later night cocktail with that, or a nightcap. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I thought about adding it to this, but then it just didn't make sense. Oh, mercy. That Hinterland bourbon is really nice. I got to tell you that. I mean, I'm getting very little alcohol bite going on here. That little bit of maple syrup kind of balances out nicely, and then those black walnut bitters I'm getting low on. I've had this bottle for about a year, so gonna have to buy another one, I guess. It's really good. I do like the black walnut bitters, man. They do add a lot of aromatics, and black walnuts are indigenous to my neck of the woods here, so it kind of makes sense. Piney River Brewing Company, about 2 hours from where I live here, they do a black walnut wheat beer that's really delicious. And I'm kind of surprised more breweries don't take advantage of the black walnut, but it is kind of difficult to brew with. I haven't had any for a while. The next time I do come up with some black walnuts, I would like to do a black walnut simple. But black walnuts are quite different from your English walnuts. I mean, It's only the same in the name walnut because I mean the aromatics, the flavors are completely different. And black walnuts aren't for everybody. They're very big. Um, some might say pungent. But I personally love black walnuts. But again, they're not the same animal as your typical English walnut. They really aren't. So I got a lot of white going on outside today. We did have a snow day here in the Ozarks. Didn't really affect me personally because, other than the fact I'm not going out anywhere. But I mean, I was off today. I'm off today and tomorrow anyway. It's likely school's going to be canceled today and tomorrow, and we'll see if it goes any farther than that. I'm not sure about. I know some friends that work for the public schools that seem to think that they probably will go ahead and cancel for the week based on past behavior, but sometimes it's really hard to tell. He's no longer here, but several years ago we had a superintendent who came from the Colorado or Denver area. So his first winter here, he wasn't calling off shit because they wouldn't out there. But he soon found that it's not quite the same thing. So he got a lot of criticism the first time he didn't call off school when folks were having trouble getting there and getting their kids there. However, he kind of overcorrected because the next time he canceled soon, and people criticized him because he canceled too soon. The bottom line is that people here in the Ozarks are never happy, no matter what decision you make. So you've got to just be decisive. Make that decision, make it as early as possible, and stand by it because you're always going to piss off somebody, whether you call it off or don't call it. But yeah, it did seem like that. It did seem like the second time he kind of overcorrected. But in my point of view, I would rather you do that. I mean, always err on the side of safety. Maybe you didn't have to call that day, but you did it out of, you again, you erred on the side of safety, I guess, rather than say, hey, go ahead and go and have something go wrong and then you get sued. And that's the kind of the bottom line here is people are always mad about everything here. It's very red and very right leaning, and they are never happy about anything. I think some people just want to be pissed off all the time. They're only happy unless they're pissed off about something. Anyway, anyways, I digress. Okay, so bear with me. I got to step off camera for about 2 minutes. Probably it takes me a little bit to get to my fridge and back here, but I will return with a second cocktail. Bear with me. All right, so for cocktail number two, I went sort of the same, just slightly different. Um, so I have a product from where did I put it? I thought I had it right here. No, I don't find it. Okay, there it is. There it is, man. So I picked up this product at Watershed Distillery last September when my wife and I were there for our anniversary. It is at 56.8 proof. It's a barrel finished Nocino. Now I'd never had Nocino before. And this is a barrel finish version, so I've never had a non-barrel finish version. This is the only Nocino I've ever had. But I got to tell you, I just love this product. So I've been using this sort of in place of um, sweet vermouth to do a Manhattan-like cocktail. So this particular cocktail, I'm using the Nocino combined with the Watershed uncut, unfiltered, straight bourbon at 122.2 proof. Let me show you that bottle. So I'm using the Nocino there with the bourbon and then the black walnut. Black walnut bitters. But here's what I did a little bit different because I've done this cocktail before. I added just a touch. Just a drip, in all honesty, of that bourbon barrel aged maple. Just a touch. I didn't want to add much. I didn't want, just a little, just add a touch of sweetness to the black walnut. Just to change it up because I hadn't done that before. I've done the same cocktail, but not adding the syrups, you see. Anyway, this stuff is just absolutely gorgeous, man. So, but I digress. So I do have some dinner cooking right now. I've got a pork roast in the oven. Wanted to, I like to braise. Dad always roasted everything, which means a high temp for a short amount of time. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but once I learned how to braise, I felt like I got more flavor out of the product using the braising method, which is you get a sear on whatever your meat you're using. Take it out, put whatever veg you're going to put in there, put the meat back in, add liquid. For me, it's usually about 2 cups, but you don't want to submerge your product, right? For me, it's just enough to usually cover the veg. But it usually amounts to about 2 cups, in all honesty. So I do prefer that method, which is covered. So you give it a nice sear on each side. You put your veg in, you put the liquid in, you put the meat back in there, then you cover it and then put it in the oven at a low temp for, depending on the size of meat you're using, anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, depending on, again, how many pounds you got in there, man. I do prefer that method. I do understand why folks like my dad preferred the roasting method, at a high temp for a short amount of time, because you wanted to get done faster. But I do find the meat to be more tender braising. I do like that French method of braising. And my dad would probably be very upset with me for saying that. Braising, what the? Dad and I had a rather difficult relationship. We got along real well until I became a teenager, because up to a certain age, I just agreed with everything he said. I was the perfect, mimic. Everything I would just agree with everything Dad said until I got to a certain age when stuff things just didn't make sense anymore. So then I started, pushing back. And once I did that, I was supposed to be the golden child. So once I started pushing back, I was no longer the favorite. And the favorite was, his firstborn daughter who always got A's. So she became the favorite. I became whatever I became. But anyway, but having said that, yeah, we did have a difficult relationship early on. Um, but when it was near the end for him, we kind of reconciled everything. He kind of understood where I came from. I started understanding where he came from, I guess, which is probably more important, right? Because for the longest time, I couldn't understand why he dug in on so many things. But a lot of it was how he was brought up. So dad grew up during the Depression era. So which is interesting because my wife and I both have parents that grew up during the Depression. So I think her and I view things differently more than most from our generation because we're coming at it a little bit differently. When things started going to hell in a handbasket back in 2020, we weren't freaking out like a lot of folks were because we already had stuff, right? I mean, we're not doomsday preppers. We didn't have canned goods lined up in the basement, but I always keep we've always kept dried beans and rice around. So even when things became less plentiful, we could always do a meal. We could always have food. May not be exactly what we wanted, but we could always put something together. And I think that was a lot of it was because of our upbringing. We were taught to always have certain things on hand because you never know what's going to happen next. But then again, going back to my dad and the depression. So dad, a lot of his friends joined the military when they saw the handwriting on the wall. His brother-in-law joined the Navy to avoid the Army, and dad told me he was just about to enlist when he was drafted into the Army. So and he said, well, actually, he didn't tell me this. A friend of his told me this. They like to take those guys from the Midwest and put them in the infantry because they knew how to shoot. Dad was really good at what he did, apparently. But what my brother was able to find out later was something Dad never told us. Dad, Dad never told us any of this. We didn't find out Dad had a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart until they sold their house in 1988 and things had to be packed up because he had it in a tiny corner in the closet in a box. It wasn't displayed, and he never told anybody he had it. Although I was 12 years old when we went to Denver to meet a friend of his. We're going to South Dakota on vacation, first vacation we ever had at all. But anyways, anyway, we met that friend of his, and he told me Dad saved his life. He didn't tell me about the Bronze Star, but I later put that connection together. But it said your dad saved my life. So usually it was about Dad and his friends, the people he grew up with. This wasn't somebody he grew up with, but they stay close because, well, this other person's tried to stay close because Dad saved his life. The truth is, Dad didn't try to stay close because Dad didn't want to remember it. But I didn't realize that till much later. Which I always find interesting about folks today, right? Folks today, we talk about the World War II generation as the greatest generation. And I've noticed that a lot of military of today wants to try to walk that back. Were they really? Because they had a lot of flaws. Well, of course they did. But they were able to do things that other generations weren't. And the thing that kind of bothers me a little bit is that you got folks today that are doing great things. They really are. But are they doing great things for the sake of doing great things? Or are they doing great things? Or are they trying to or they're trying to appear to do great things just so they can write a book or a screenplay and get famous. And I think that feels what's different about folks today as opposed to folks from my dad's generation, because these guys weren't trying to get any accolades. My dad played down anytime anybody said anytime I heard anybody say anything about my dad doing anything heroic, dad would play it down. I mean, in a big way. And I got to tell you, this wasn't a guy that would shy away from being applauded, right? I mean, he could do something very minor and want to take a lot of credit for it. But as far as anything from the war was concerned, he didn't want to take credit for it. And I think that is what is decidedly different from that generation to today's generation. Is that today's generation does something small, they want great accolades for. Again, my dad and I didn't have the greatest relationship for a period of years. We were great for up to a certain point, up until I quit being obedient. And when I started questioning things, when I started asking questions, when I became that rebellious teenager, yeah, we had our difficulties, but I mean that's not unusual. But we did reconcile at the end. I remember uh, it was close. It wasn't right there where he was dying, but it was inevitable at this point. And him and I had a conversation because I was getting some pushback from other family members. I had the ability to take a promotion, but some of my family members said it wasn't a good time for me to do this because dad was in the situation he was in, and I lived close to him. Those other family members that didn't live close to him, well, actually, just one, in all honesty, that didn't live close said, "This isn't a good time for me to leave because dad, but why don't you move closer?" But anyway, regardless, dad and I had a long conversation. Dad looked at me and he said, "You have to do what's best for your family, not me." He says, "Son, I'm dying. I might not be dying today or tomorrow, but I am dying. And you need to do what's best for your family." And it was at that moment that I finally felt that I had some respect, right? Um, him and I had some difficulties. We had different philosophies of life and a lot of things, but I felt at that moment we understood each other. And then when I came back later, once we knew he was really dying, uh, we had various long conversations about, yeah, we disagreed, but was it really that important? You can disagree about minor things and still love somebody, and uh, I felt like that's where we ended anyway, as we understood where each other was, and we kind of agreed that both of us made mistakes along the way. Dad was brought up a very specific way. So it took him a while to be able to relax. Once I became a certain age, I rebelled in a great big way. So it took me a long time to realize where he was coming from. And at least near the end there, we were able to find that middle ground where we both respected each other. At least I think, anyway. That's the way I'm going to choose to remember it. Anyway, why are you getting so serious, Tom? I don't know. Sometimes it happens to me. Anyways, let me finish this up. So I've got the okay. What are you drinking, Tom? Happy hour. I've got the Watershed straight bourbon whiskey. I've got the Watershed Nicino, some black walnut bitters. Let me check this real quick again. Hmm. Anyways, I digress. I am Tom the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, purveyor of wisdom, and uh, I've had had some conversations with folks recently that I find interesting. Is that when I talk to folks who are slightly to the left of center, when they send their kids off to college, they're always proud of what they learned. When I talk to folks who send their kids to college that are on the right of center, and their kids come home, they always say their kids have become indoctrinated. Your kids haven't become indoctrinated. Your kids got educated, and they learned something besides the little small world you tried to teach them. What you were doing to them was indoctrination. What they did was learn and expand their horizons and become something else. It's always, I just find that bizarre. They go to college and become indoctrinated. No, they didn't. They went to college and became educated. You wanted to indoctrinate them. You did indoctrinate them. You wanted to instill them with a very specific ideology. And when they go off somewhere else and learn something different, you think that's indoctrination. No, what you did to them was indoctrination. What they did to themselves was to obtain knowledge. I am Tom, the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker, purveyor of wisdom man.